Can a man outrun the calendar? Can a legend, hardened by decades of championship pressure, truly defy the gravitational pull of time itself? For years, the hallowed grounds of Augusta National had become synonymous with Jack William Nicklaus. 5 times he had conquered this course. 5 times he had slipped into the coveted green jacket, cementing his place as the undisputed lender du golf, the Golden Bear. But by the spring of 1986, the whispers around the 19th hole were growing louder, and they were cruel. The narrative, pushed by columns in every major newspaper, was cold, clinical. Nicklaus was 46. He hadn't won a major championship since 1980. His swing was slower, his putting touch inconsistent. He was a monument, perhaps, but a monument whose great work was finished. The media had politely, perhaps prematurely, retired him. It is a curious thing about human nature. We desperately want to witness greatness, yet we are often too quick to declare its expiration date. The field that April was young, hungry, and unforgiving. Names like Ballesteros, Kite, and Watson represented the future, armed with power and confidence. They expected the aging champion to fade quietly into the role of ceremonial host. But the greatest athletes rarely accept the final chapter dictated by others. They write their own. What unfolded that Sunday afternoon was not merely a victory. It was a seismic shift in sporting history. It was the ultimate act of super-assault, a dramatic declaration of independence from Father Time. This was Nicklaus finding that hidden gear, the one reserved only for the truly transcendent, to orchestrate the most improbable volta por cima the game had ever known. It was a quest for Resurgence, culminating in an achievement that would forever stand alone, the mythical sexto green jacket. But which moment precisely did you believe the comeback was truly possible? Was it the eagle on the 15th or the stunning birdie on the 16th? Comment below and share the exact shot that told you the Golden Bear was back. We'll be discussing the responses later in the series. It was an oppressive, humid Sunday afternoon in Augusta, Georgia, April 13, 1986. The azaleas were in full defiant bloom, a beautiful counterpoint to the tension that hung heavy in the pine-scented air. The course, pristine and demanding, was ready to crown a new champion, or perhaps reluctantly acknowledge the return of an old master. Golf, the gentleman's game, was about to witness a seismic shift, a reckoning between the inevitable march of time and the immutable will of a champion. Jack Nicklaus, the Golden Bear, was 46 years old. For 5 years, the golf world had politely but firmly moved on. The narrative had shifted from Nicklaus's geometric dominance to the thrilling, swashbuckling rise of Greg Norman, Seve Ballesteros, and the young challengers. The press, often unkind in its assessment of fading legends, had relegated him to the role of ceremonial elder statesman. One local paper, infamously, had declared him finished, citing his declining physical prowess and lack of recent major championship form. The stage was set not for a coronation, but perhaps a definitive farewell. Nicklaus started the final round 4 shots off the pace. His swing, though perhaps lacking the youthful fluidity of his prime, retained its fundamental power. But what the body lacked, the mind supplied in abundance. He played the front 9 steadily, but without the spectacular bursts necessary for a master's charge. He reached the turn, still trailing significantly. Then something primal, something rooted in decades of victory and competitive memory, awakened. He birdied the 9th. He birdied the 10th. The spectators, sensing the shift, began to murmur. But the true ignition point, the moment the legend truly decided to rewrite history, came on the 15th, a crucial par 5 demanding precision over water. Nicklaus stood 200 yards from the flag. He pulled a 4-iron. The gallery held its breath. This was the moment of truth for a man whose competitive window was supposedly shut. The shot was struck with the conviction of a man 20 years younger, piercing the Georgia sky. It landed softly, settling 12 feet from the pin. The resulting eagle electrified the gallery. The roar that echoed through Amen Corner was not merely applause, it was the sound of history being urgently corrected. And there is one more detail you might not imagine. As he walked off the 15th green, Nicklaus looked up at the leaderboards, calculating. At that precise moment, he was still behind the leaders, but the momentum was his. He knew he needed something truly extraordinary over the final 3 holes. On the treacherous par 3 16th, the classic moment unfolded. Nicklaus watched his son Jackie caddying for him, analyze the line. The famous exchange ensued, immortalized in the annals of golf lore. Nicklaus asked his son, "How far is it?" Jackie replied simply, "Hit a good one, Dad." He pulled the 5-iron. The ball landed perfectly on the elevated green, catching the ridge and feeding the slope towards the cup. It paused, agonizingly, on the lip, then dropped. The eruption of noise was deafening, the ground shaking beneath the spectator's feet. He was tied for the lead. The 17th hole, a demanding par 4. He drilled the drive, then hit a magnificent approach to 12 feet. The putt was pure, centered in the cup, a roar for the ages. Nicklaus had performed the impossible. 3 holes, 4 under par. He had shot an astonishing 30 on the back 9. He walked the 18th hole, the crowd surging behind him, his face a mask of fierce focus and quiet disbelief. The scoreboard was shifting wildly, reflecting the drama unfolding behind him. Ballesteros found the water on the 15th. Norman faltered slightly. Though Nicklaus was done, his 68 was a monumental target that the chasing pack could not reach. The 6th green jacket, secured at 46, defied biological certainty and golfing expectation. It was a victory not just over the field, but over the cynicism of age and the relentless pressure of expectation. Nicklaus had reminded the world that while youth may bring power, true mastery resides in the mind and the heart. The 1986 Masters remains, for many who stood in those pines, the most compelling Sunday in the sport's history. It validated the notion that legends do not simply fade. Sometimes they roar back when you least expect them. For more stories that capture the quiet brilliance and defining traditions of this gentleman's game, consider joining us as we explore the archives of golf history. We'll see you at the next tee. It was April in Augusta 1986. The dogwoods were in full vibrant bloom, and the air, usually so peaceful in the Georgia pines, was thick with expectation and perhaps a heavy dose of skepticism. Jack William Nicklaus, the Golden Bear, was 46 years old. By the standards of professional sport, he was an anachronism. He had not secured a major championship since the 1980 PGA. The consensus among the press corps and the younger generation of players, the sleek, aggressive talents like Seve Ballesteros, Bernhard Langer and Greg Norman, was polite but firm. Nicklaus's era, the age of dominance, had passed. His name was reserved for the history books, not the Sunday leaderboard. He began the final round 4 strokes behind the leader. A fine effort for a man of his vintage, certainly, but hardly threatening. The narrative was set. Nicklaus would play a dignified final round, perhaps finish top 10, and the young lions would fight amongst themselves for the coveted green jacket. Yet golf, unlike other athletic pursuits, holds a unique reverence for memory and experience. There is a magic that often lingers around certain champions when they return to hallowed grounds. And as the afternoon wore on, a feeling began to permeate the slopes of Augusta National, a feeling that history, long dormant, was stirring. The front 9 was solid, unspectacular, but the back 9 at Augusta is where legends are either forged or broken, culminating in the treacherous challenge of Amen Corner. Nicklaus played the 10th and 11th conservatively. He faced the famous par 3 12th, the shortest hole on the course, which has wrecked more championship dreams than any other. He secured par. It was on the par 5 13th, named Azalea, that the true resurgence began. He hit a magnificent drive, followed by a masterful approach that set up a crucial birdie. The crowd, previously restrained by Southern decorum, began to buzz. Nicklaus was now 2 under for the day, closing the gap. But the true fireworks commenced at the par 5 15th, known as Firethorn, a hole that demands courage and precision over water. Nicklaus stood over his second shot, 202 yards to the pin. He pulled the 4-iron from the bag. The shot was pure. It soared over the pond, landed softly and settled 20 feet from the hole. The roar of the gallery was immediate and visceral. He sank the subsequent eagle putt. 3 shots, 5 under par, and the leaderboard was suddenly turned on its head. The tension was now palpable, the air thick enough to cut with a knife. He strode to the 16th tee, the legendary Redbud, a par 3 requiring a precise tee shot over water to a sloping green. The pin was tucked on the left. Nicklaus hit a 6-iron that barely cleared the front bunker, catching the slope perfectly. It tracked the hole slowing, stopping a mere 2 inches from the cup, a tap-in birdie. In the span of 3 holes, 15, 16 and 17, Nicklaus played 5 under par, a phenomenal streak of golf that defied every known law of competitive aging. And there is one detail you cannot imagine. When Nicklaus arrived at the 17th tee, his son and caddie Jackie whispered to him, "How about one more good one, Dad?" Nicklaus, radiating a calm confidence that belied the chaos swirling around him, replied simply, "I'm going to take a run at it." That casual, utterly self-assured statement defined the competitive spirit of the man. He then sank a pivotal 18-foot birdie putt, securing the outright lead. He stood on the 18th tee, tied with Seve Ballesteros, who was still out on the course. The drive was perfect. The approach was conservative but safe, landing just short of the green. He chipped up, leaving a testing par putt. He drained it. The final, thunderous roar that erupted from the crowd was deafening, echoing through the hills of the hallowed grounds. When Greg Norman faltered on the 18th, the impossible was secured. The 6th green jacket, the ultimate validation of a legend who refused to yield to the calendar. This wasn't merely a tournament victory. It was a defiant statement on aging, on expectation, and on the enduring power of the competitive spirit. It stands, arguably, as the most cherished Sunday in the modern history of the gentleman's game. For those who witnessed it, the image of Nicklaus raising his putter in the fading light of that April afternoon will forever be etched in memory. For more stories that molded the spirit of the fairway, and for a deeper look into the history of the game, consider joining us again. Until then, we shall see you at the next tee. It was an April afternoon, heavy with the scent of blooming azaleas and freshly cut rye. The year was 1986. The stage, as always, was Augusta National, the hallowed ground where careers are defined and sometimes quite cruelly ended. Jack Nicklaus, the Golden Bear, stood at the precipice of 46. His last major victory had been 6 years prior. The younger lions of the game, Seve Ballesteros, Greg Norman, Tom Kite, had claimed the mantle of relevance. The press, with its customary short memory, had begun to refer to Nicklaus as a ceremonial golfer, a beloved relic whose time for serious contention had passed. He had missed the cut at the US Open the previous year. The narrative was set. Respect the past, but look to the future. But golf, this gentleman's game, has a way of rewarding those who understand its deep, immutable history. Nicklaus understood the subtle geometry of Augusta like no other. He knew where to miss, where to attack, and perhaps most importantly, when to remain patient. Sunday began quietly for Jack. He was 4 strokes adrift of the lead, a distance that, against a field of such ferocious talent, felt like an ocean. The front 9 was a measured effort, a steady par, 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 a deliberate pacing that suggested experience over youthful exuberance. The Golden Bear was stalking, not sprinting. The turn came and the theatre of the impossible began to unfold. At the 10th, he salvaged a crucial par. At the 11th, another. The charge, however, began in earnest at the par 5 13th. A magnificent drive, followed by a controlled second shot, set up a birdie. The momentum shifted subtly. Then came the 15th, a moment that remains etched in golf lore. Needing to make up ground, Nicklaus pulled his 4-iron, a club demanding precision and courage, and struck a majestic approach shot that settled 12 feet from the pin. The subsequent eagle putt was not just a shot, it was a declaration. As the ball disappeared, the roar that erupted from the gallery shook the Georgia pines. For the first time in nearly a decade, the old warrior was truly back in the hunt. But there is a detail often overlooked that truly defines this victory. Nicklaus's son, Jackie, was caddying for him that week. As Jack stood on the 16th tee, a treacherous water-guarded par 3, he turned to his son and asked, "How far do you think a well-struck 3-iron will fly?" Jackie, without hesitation, replied, 205 yards, Dad." Nicklaus struck the ball precisely, and it landed on the green, checked, and began its slow, agonizing roll toward the hole. It stopped just 2 feet shy. The birdie that followed, punctuated by the iconic call of Werner Lundqvist, "Yes, sir," was pure emotional dynamite. He followed that with a textbook birdie on the 17th, draining a critical 12-footer to take the outright lead. In the span of 4 holes, Nicklaus had gone 6 under par. It was a statistical anomaly, a display of focused aggression rarely seen from a man his age or any age on the Sunday back 9 of a major. Standing on the 18th tee, with the sun dipping low over the clubhouse, he held the lead. He played the hole conservatively, securing a final triumphant par. His 65-stroke final round was complete. The crowd was delirious, captivated by the sheer audacity of the comeback. The victory, however, was not yet secured. He retired to the clubhouse, watching on a small monitor as the young guns, Greg Norman and Seve Ballesteros, attempted to catch him. Ballesteros found the water on the 15th. Norman, the shark, who had played brilliantly all week, faltered on the 18th, pushing his approach shot right into the gallery, sealing Nicklaus's destiny. That was more than a record 6th green jacket. It was a reaffirmation of the enduring power of skill, memory, and competitive fire. It proved that in the crucible of professional golf, experience, when married to talent, can indeed defeat the relentless march of time. Who was there witnessing the improbable resurrection of the Golden Bear never forgot the sound of those roars. For more stories that shape this magnificent sport, and for a deeper look into the legends who walk these fairways, consider joining us again. We'll see you at the next tee. The year was 1986. A warm, almost spiritual stillness settled over Augusta National, thick with the scent of pine needles and azaleas. This was not just a major championship, it was a pilgrimage. But for one man, the journey had become arduous, punctuated by the faint whispers of history being written without him. Jack William Nicklaus arrived in Georgia, not as the undisputed king, but as a distinguished elder statesman. At 46, an age where most golf champions transition gracefully into the commentary booth or the senior tour, the Golden Bear had not secured a major championship in 6 long seasons. The headlines were polite yet dismissive. A fond farewell, the sun sets on the Bear. Even a major newspaper columnist had publicly suggested that Nicklaus was gone, finished, done. Such pronouncements are often the fuel that ignites the competitive fire in true legends. Nicklaus himself, having battled the relentless metrics of time and the ever-improving youth of the game, felt the pressure, yet also a deep internal calm. He was playing with his son Jackie on the bag, a partnership steeped in family legacy, and the simplicity of the moment seemed to strip away the expectations of 2 decades of dominance. The early rounds were solid but unspectacular. By Sunday, he trailed the leader, Greg Norman, by 4 strokes. The leaderboard was a murderer's row of youthful talent: Seve Ballesteros, the charismatic Spaniard, Nick Price, and the ever-present threat of Tom Kite. The true theatre of the 1986 Masters began on the Sunday back 9, a stretch of holes known throughout the world as the crucible of championship golf. Nicklaus stepped onto the 10th tee, seemingly out of contention, his score stagnant. But then, a subtle shift occurred. A birdie on the 10th, a par on the 11th. Then, the treacherous beauty of Amen Corner. The pivotal moment arrived at the par 5 15th, Firethorn. After a powerful drive, Nicklaus stood over his second shot, facing a daunting 202 yards over water. He famously told his son, "How far is it, Jackie? 18 feet. We need a 3. He pulled a 4-iron. The swing was classic, compact, and powerful, a vintage move that seemed to defy his birth certificate. The ball soared, cleared the water, and settled 15 feet from the pin. The subsequent eagle putt was struck with the authority of a man who owned the course. As the ball dropped, the sound was not merely applause. It was a seismic event. The roar rolled through the Georgia pines, a physical wave of noise that signaled the legend's return. Suddenly, the impossible felt inevitable. On the 16th, Redbud, a 170-yard par 3 guarded by water, Nicklaus hit perhaps the most famous shot of his career. The 6-iron sailed high, landed perfectly beyond the pin, and spun back, settling inches from the cup. Another birdie. The crowd noise was now a continuous, deafening vibration. He was tied for the lead. The 17th Nandina cemented the legacy. A tricky uphill par 4. Nicklaus's approach left him 18 feet below the hole. This was the moment of true test, the psychological strain of maintaining a charge while leading a major championship at his age. He lined up the putt, and with absolute conviction drained it for a 3rd consecutive birdie. He had shot 7 strokes under par in 10 holes. The final walk up the 18th fairway was a coronation. He secured a par, signing for a magnificent 65, the lowest final round by a winner in Masters history up to that point. He stood by the clubhouse, the afternoon sun casting long shadows, waiting for the young challengers to falter. And they did. Norman pushed his approach left on 18. Ballesteros found the water on 15. The 6th green jacket, draped over Nicklaus's shoulders that evening, was more than a trophy. It was a testament to the enduring power of competitive spirit, a fierce rebuttal to the notion that the clock dictates destiny. It was the ultimate validation of the gentleman's game, proving that experience, when coupled with courage, can indeed conquer the vitality of youth. The 1986 Masters remains the benchmark for all sporting comebacks, a story told in hushed tones around the world. Who among us, watching that triumphant walk, did not feel the stir of inspiration? The impossible had been rendered beautiful. For more stories that capture the quiet majesty and dramatic flair of this historic game, consider joining our gallery. We invite you to share your memories of that Sunday in the comments below. We will see you on the next tee.